is that we have the frame generation UI mode. This is a new thing for this game specifically. So and well, let me just start this video telling you that FSR frame generation is now fixed. And stay tuned, because in this video I'll show you several things that you most likely don't know, so do not skip parts. Just do it! In case you don't remember or you haven't watched at all, some months ago I released a video testing FSR frame generation, because in some games indeed the frame pacing was completely messed up. In games like The Altars, in games like Silent Hill, and some others like Titan Quest as well, the frame pacing was completely messed up, Expedition 33, unless we force enabled VSync on the drivers. And what happens now is that with the new FSR frame generation, it seems that you don't really need that anymore, at least not for most cases. And where VSync wasn't working before, inside the game, it now is. AMD released a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago the new FSR SDK 2.3, and in the 2.3 version we have FSR upscaling 4.1.1, FSR frame generation 4.0.1 from the 4.0.0, again an improvement, AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution frame generation SwapChain 3.1.7, and then AMD FSR Ray Regeneration 1.2.0. Again, the versions that we tested were like 1.0 or something like that. Now we have 1.2.0. And as for what changed, the SwapChain is the main thing. There are lots of people, and there were lots of people commenting on my comment section, telling me and asking me to test FSR frame generation because they now use SwapChain, or they changed something in the SwapChain. I don't really know many details. That's not my thing. But what it matters is that something was changed, and now the frame pacing of frame generation is much better. And of course I'll show you that right after today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing lots of software deals like Windows 11 and its several versions like Home, Pro, and even the LTSC Enterprise. You also have Office 2024 with a Windows 11 design, where you can use my SKG discount code for 25% off, getting your Windows 11 key for $26 and Office 2024 for $17. After that, just go to your account, get your serial key, use it on your Windows settings, and you'll have an activated system. Now you might be asking yourself, what do you need to make this work, to make the newest version of the frame generation work? Well, first of all, if your drivers are upgrading the version, so if you're playing a game, let's say, and you have at least the 22.6.2 driver, so 26.6.2, 26.6.3, or 26.6.4, if you have any of these drivers or newer by any means, you'll have at least the frame generation 4.0.1 and FSR upscaling 4.1.1 and so on. And first of all, let's enable the overlay, which of course will show you if we are using an upscale upgrade or FG upgrade via driver. That's a plus that I want to show. Let's just select game detection for metrics overlay just for the games. Now, one of the games where we were having issues was with the altars. And as of now, I can tell you that if I press Alt plus R and go to gaming, you can see that I am not using the forced vertical refresh rate. And even though that I'm not using the forced vertical VSync or vertical VSync, the forced vertical refresh rate, or in this case, vertical synchronization, VSync, and it is very smooth. And again, I'm not using the forced VSync that I had to use before, but with the new drivers 26.6.4 and the newer frame generation, it not only feels very responsive, but it also works wonderfully and perfectly as it should. And even if I go below the 160 mark, it still feels very well and just works. 160 it is, and very smooth. And this was something that did not work before, and no, it was not an update in the altars. I tested with the previous drivers and vertical sync still didn't work, but with this new version of the drivers and machine learning frame generation, it does work. It does work and works very well. Not only the frame generation is better, but the vertical sync also assumes inside the game something that wasn't working before, and I suppose it was meant to. It just didn't work. Now it is perfect. You just go, you enable frame generation, enable VSync, and it works very, very well. One of the games that did not work before is now working perfectly, The Alters, and the VSync option inside the game is actually doing its job, and it is locking the frame generation, and the frame pacing is just very, very good without no need to do it via the drivers that will add more latency on top of it. So it is not only more responsive but also way smoother, which is great. Now let's test another game. I have here my notepad, and the second game is Titan Quest 2 that also needed vertical sync inside the game, and sometimes even inside the game wouldn't really work and we had to force it via driver. So let's see how it rolls. As soon as we run into Titan Quest, you can immediately see that we have the upscale upgrade and the FG upgrade active, meaning that we're using FSR 4.1.1, upscaling, and 4.0.1 frame generation. And as you can see in terms of frame rates, we're going above, or not above, we're going at 160, which is my monitor's refresh rate because I'm using vertical sync. Now, one of the things that we have here new and is very, very important is that we have the frame generation UI mode. This is a new thing for this game specifically. So for the frame generation UI mode, we get redraw and extract. Changes how FSR frame generation handles the user interface. Redraw redraws the UI interpolated frames, this avoids visual artifacts on in-world UI elements, but has a higher performance impact, and this is the one that we're using, and I'm going to show you how good it is. Then we have Extract, that reuses the rendered UI from a non-interpolated frame for better performance, but can cause some visual artifacts. And I believe this is how Nvidia does it in their frame generation. If you look, for example, with Nvidia frame generation, sometimes I tested multi-frame generation, for example, and I believe it was in Hell is Us. Yes, it was in Hell is Us. As soon as I went to the menus, I was having artifacts in the menus because the frame generation was applying to the UI as well. That's basically how it works, and that's something that with this method does not apply with FSR frame generation, and that's great, meaning that a UI won't really have artifacts. Look, for example, here at the UI, it definitely isn't easy to read, but at least we don't really have any artifacts whatsoever, and the same applies for the rest of the UI. It just works as it should. It's very nice that we have these options. We can select from a kind of a copy of a non-interpolated frame, or of the original frame, or just kind of frame generate everything. I mean, it's just great. As for smoothness, yeah, man, this is just very, very smooth. This is the smoothest I've ever tested this game, to be honest. Even with a lower base frame rate count of 70 or sometimes even lower than that, yeah, it just works very, very smoothly, and it is definitely an improvement. For example, here we have like 120, meaning that we are going from base of 60 frames, and even here the gameplay just feels quite smooth. Definitely more on the 120 side than on the 60 side. That is exactly what we would feel before. Improvement 100%. Now, Silent Hill 2 is one of those games that would allow me to upgrade the version of upscaling, but it would not allow me to upgrade the version of frame generation. And in case you don't know, you need to have, at least inside the game, the DLL for FSR frame generation 3.1.4 in order to be able to upgrade to the new machine learning frame generation. With this being said, this game does not really have that version, so I had to go and download the SDK version 1.4, I believe, that brings the 3.1.5 or 3.1.6 frame generation, swap the DLLs, and now I can actually upgrade the upscale and frame generation. And in this game, frame generation was improved for sure, but it was not fixed. If I go here, I'm having 150 FPS, around that. and I can see that generally the smoothness is there, but as soon as we go to the bottom half of the screen, I can see some tearing there. It's quite small and it's definitely playable, but it isn't as smooth as it should be. And the reason is that you can't just go to the settings and enable VSync. As soon as you enable frame generation, the option to enable VSync will just be locked, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this tearing. Now, compared to the previous version, the previous version that you can see in the video that I tested previously, it works much smoother, definitely. But again, if you look here, for example on the cardboard, you'll be able to see that we have some artifacts here in the bottom, and those artifacts shouldn't be happening since we're inside our monitor's refresh rate, which is 160 Hz. This shouldn't happen. As soon as I go, for example, to the drivers here, if I go Alt+R and force vertical sync inside this game, these same artifacts that you're seeing here won't happen. So for Silent Hill it is better, but still not fixed. Now we're into Arc Raiders, and Arc Raiders was another game where frame generation didn't work. The frame pacing was completely messed up. I tried the frame pacing with FSR 3.1 frame generation, FSR 4 frame generation, and the frame pacing was just completely messed up. And by the way, you don't really see the upgrade thing there, because with the 26.6.4 drivers, it seems that the software doesn't even recognize Arc Raiders as being, well, launched. It will show on the games tab, it will show you the FPS, but it doesn't really recognize the game. As soon as I press Alt+R, as you can see, it doesn't even go immediately to the games tab, and if I go here, it doesn't show that the game is running, and that's the reason why, yeah, it just isn't working as it should. But yeah, 79 FPS, and we enable the frame generation here. As you can see, VSync got immediately off and locked. And we went now to 146. What I can tell you immediately is that it is much smoother than it was before. Before, the frame pacing was completely messed up, meaning that, again, if we looked at the screen and we did this, instead of feeling like it was at 130 or 140 FPS, it felt like we were at 70 or sometimes even lower than 70. So frame generation made no sense whatsoever, because frame generation is an improvement, a technique that serves to improve the smoothness of the gameplay. But like Silent Hill 2, as soon as we look here at the bottom of the screen, just has some artifacts, especially when we're running. It basically feels like we're having tearing, but we're still inside the monitor's refresh rate, so it can't be tearing, and it isn't definitely tearing. It is just artifacts from frame generation. But again, if I just go and force vertical sync through the drivers, it will work. Arc Raiders, force enable, VSync. I mean, it is just way smoother. And to be honest, in this specific game, I don't really know if it is because we're using newer drivers, if we are using anti-lag 2 inside the game, I don't really know. But in this specific game, the latency is still very, very low. And remember what I told you about the bottom half with artifacts like we had with Silent Hill 2? It is now fixed and the game is fully smooth. It is. It definitely is. Now we're running Samson and we're using FSR quality with frame generation and VSync enabled every V blank. And it is so smooth. And as you can see, vertical sync enabled inside the game and we're running at 160 FPS. If I press Alt+R and go to the gaming tab, now the software detects the game Samson, and as you can see, wait for vertical refresh, it is not enabled. Now, one of those things that I said that I would tell you and you most likely did not know is that In this game specifically, and there are some other games, but I'm talking about Samson, for example, using the vertical sync inside the game, and now the upscale upgrade says supported instead of active, but it is active again, it's a bug. It should say active now, but it doesn't say. Anyways, with Samson, if you want to enable vertical sync inside the game, it will work. It will work if you are injecting FSR through the drivers. So if you are injecting FSR on top of the original files inside the game, vertical sync will work with frame generation, and it will work well, as you can see, very smooth, as it should. But if for any instance you just go and swap the LLs, I tried this before, if you're using the LSS swapper, for example, as soon as you try to enable vertical sync with frame generation, it won't work. The frame generation won't be capped with VSync, but if you inject it through the drivers, it will. Now, frame generation is working very smoothly, no issues whatsoever in Samson, another game that is working perfectly. And by now, if you're asking yourself if you should really enable VSync with frame generation, yes, that's exactly how it works. You want the frame generation to keep the frames inside your monitor's refresh rate in order for you to not have tearing, because as soon as you go above your monitor's refresh rate, you'll have tearing and it won't feel smooth. So yes, you want vertical sync to lock your frames, and I mean, it just works. It just works with your frames locked. This is how you should play it. Look, for example, at Mortal Shell. Mortal Shell 2, latency wise, it is very responsive. I'm not even joking, like very responsive, and we're playing at 160 frames, and we're using frame generation, even though it says supported and FG upscale and so on. Again, this shit is bugged. AMD needs to fix it ASAP, otherwise it makes no sense to have it enabled in the first place. Oh, the reason why it is not showing here is because I swapped the LLs. And Mortal Shell 2 is one of those games where even if I swap the LLs, it will still allow me to use vertical sync, and man, the frame generation just works great. Latest frame generation, FSR 4.0.1, just works great. It is very smooth. As you can see, no issues whatsoever. It just works. Chill out, boy. Firstly, I thought that frame generation was kind of bugged in this game, so I was playing around 100 FPS, something like that. But as soon as I enabled frame generation and I kept vertical sync on and I saw it worked, yeah, I just immediately started playing with frame generation because it just feels much better. Again, for me, there's absolutely no reason to not use frame generation in single-player games as of now, both with AMD and Nvidia cards. And I can tell you, I can assure you, FSR frame generation is mostly fixed and completely fixed for most games. Games where the vertical sync didn't stick before, like the alters and so on, now work, and the experience is very good. And well guys, that's all for this video. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think of it. If you already tested the new versions of frame generation, of FSR frame generation, being it the machine learning version or the analytical version, just let me know in the comment section because I really want to. And I really want to see if you guys tested the version or the option to use vertical sync. And if you were using frame generation without vertical sync, well, that's why frame generation didn't feel good to you. Just go there, enable vertical sync. If the game does not allow you to enable vertical sync, go to the drivers and force vertical sync, and you'll see that frame generation will work, well, great now, and you will be finally able to enjoy it. Thank you very much, hope you enjoyed the video, and see you in the next one. Cheers.